Hello. Today we are going to be overviewing the unstoppable hypermodern Sicilian opening for Red Yellow. This is an opening that I came up with the help of Icy Stun and Tom Merrill, my teammate for the first four-player Team Chess World Championships. So this opening is based off of the idea of opening this diagonal. Back in the day, the opening was to move this up, and the queen came out. This turned out to be a very limited form of the opening, and the Icy Stone Cooch teammate defense turned out to be too much to handle. So we needed more flexibility to account for all the threats from the Icy Stone Cooch teammate defense, and that led to the recommendation of this move from Icy Stone, which I looked into and found to be a very strong continuation. So if you don't put tension on yellow immediately, you don't respect the power of this diagonal, I think you're in for a world of pain. And let's look at some of the common variations. This is the Sicilian con. This one, you can just move the queen out immediately. Huge tempo advantage. Now, why is that? Because if you take with the queen, then you take with check. And you cannot push because that leads to checkmate pretty quickly. So you have to guard. And here you move the knight up to attack the queen. Now here you have to take back with the bishop, best move. Why? It allows to check while opening up the rook. And this is the furthest line we'll look at. Eventually, this will be very important. So you push the pawn, very important move here. You have a mate threat, two mate threats, and also a check threat. So with the queen, you move down, and you have a couple of ideas here. Take the pawn, take the queen. Right? Now, if you make some move, like a passing move, as blue, after it's taken, then as yellow, what you do is first you block off the check. Right? And the idea here is, well, I guess I could take. Then if you think you can take with check to disrupt that, well, then first you have in-betweener. And how do you block that while also removing the mate threat? You don't have enough time. So clearly, as blue, you have to do something more active here. You have to take the pawn. Now, here you make a passing move. And as green, you have two options. First option is take the pawn. And if you take, move back, take with check, takes, and takes. And this bishop is kind of out of squares except for this one, right? And so then here, I'm guessing you'll have to look at this one because you have a fork, right? And so, yeah. I guess maybe the passing move, actually for yellow here, might be to push the pawn for check. That might be a better passing move. Who knows? At any rate, it's still a winning position. You can move the knight up over there. And the other option is to take the queen. Here you take back, and importantly, you move the knight over here, so we get that final idea, blocking with the rook. Now, this is important because first you set up a mate threat. You have to block the mate threat. And normally, this would be pinning the queen to mate. But blue has that move. So yellow can do some passing moves, stay on this diagonal. Queen moves out of the way, red takes, queen moves back in for checkmate. But with the rook placed on a7, the second you take with the bishop, the rook takes back. And so importantly here, you just win a bishop, and you're up a bishop with an open file for the rook, and a check available on blue. So this is a winning position, material-wise and positional-wise, for red-yellow. So clearly you cannot move the queen. You can't take the pawn with the blue queen early on in the game. There is another idea, to move the queen out early as green. But this one is also too quick. This one is also punishable. For if you move out too early, then as red you have a nice triple threat. Triple play actually might be the better word. This is not a threat, it's a defense. Call it a triple play. Because in this variation, first you attack the green queen, and you block off the diagonal. So green can move to only so many squares, right? And if you move to a square where yellow can attack it, for example, if you move it over here, you can attack. Over there, attack with the knight, and red moves in, and you have two threats, can only deal with one, right? And so the other idea is to move to a square where red can attack it, and if that is the case, then you move in, and then you can block, right? You can either take or block, doesn't matter. Both ways lead to attacking the queen, and then a check on green. So you're down a queen that way. And there's one other square where neither red nor yellow can attack the queen. And that's right here. But this one also doesn't work, because no matter how you block the mate, yellow can take the queen next turn. So that one is not working out. So there is one try that you have as blue-green. And this try also is not working out, but it's a little bit better. Because instead of losing a queen, you just lose a knight. And the position. So yeah, queen over here is a mistake, if not a blunder. This is the one idea you can take back. You have the check. So what do? You attack the queen to flush it away and to buy yellow a move, right? Because you want to buy yellow a move to block the check. And if you move down over here, you can block it that way. So what do? You have one of three squares to move the queen, where neither red nor yellow can attack it. Same ideas would persist, where you would check, attack the queen if red can, or move in if yellow can attack the queen. That's why one of these three squares, you are safe from that. But this one, you cannot win the queen, but you can still check to win the knight. Take, take. And here, you're up a knight, and the king is very vulnerable. Both queens are active. This is a winning position for red-yellow. So, now that we know this one does not work, next we consider what happens when blue moves the queen out too early. So here, if you move the knight up or the pawn up, I think those are the two moves as green. Pawn up and knight up. This one, you have a pin. You're guarding the queen from taking the pawn, and you set up a pin. And you have to really respect that. Because if you don't, first what you do is you block off the check from green, and then you just move in with the knight. This is one idea. Move in, move in. And you have all kinds of threats. You can attack the queen, but it's okay, because you can move away with the tempo of a mate threat. And you are not stopping all of the threats from red-yellow. So this variation does not work. There is one other attempt here. And it's the pawn push. This one, same thing. You take, and you move in with the queen. Bishop can block, but mate threat, and how are you stopping this? You're not. This is game over. 100%. So there is an idea here. And this idea, I think, works really well if you're playing against the red-yellow king-pawn variation. Not so much with the hypermodern. So if we were playing this variation, then I would... Actually, my first video is on how you use these ideas to get a very strong counterattack as blue-green and equalize. The idea is to push the pawn. Now here, you want to set up these ideas, right? So you have a counterattack on red. We're going to look at how to play against this as red-yellow. Because the thing about the queen pawn up is you have far too much initiative as red-yellow on blue. And it just kind of overpower. So first, you want to set up a defense so the knight can just not move in immediately for free, forcing blue to commit to pawn takes knight. And once you do, you immediately move in with the knight as yellow. Now you have a few different ideas, taking the pawn, blocking, and taking the pawn with the knight. All three of these ideas can work in the variation that I show against the king pawn opening, this blue-green. But against the hypermodern, this just doesn't work out. You don't even need to take the knight. You can move in. And first you want to block. There are just too many threats available. And so then you move the queen over here, defending that pawn. And you have to stay aggressive because you're about to gain initiative here. You need to have as much attack as you possibly can. So you take the knight here. And here, the other idea was to take the queen, forcing green to sack the knight. And this gives you a little bit of extra time, enough time to win the knight, and have a pretty decent position as red-yellow. So these are the ideas behind this variation. It's a crazy line. Blue-green do have some compensation for being down a bishop. I'm not sure it's enough though. So that is that line. I think it's a pretty decent try. But you're still down a piece. I don't see the advantage. And now let's look at another line here. So with the pawn push, very important again. So again, you can take here. Bishop can go one of these two squares. So we're looking at bishop here. Next to look, bishop takes pawn. Here you move in to attack. And this one, check. You don't want to see that, so you block, but it's okay. You guard the knight because the yellow bishop takes the green bishop to prevent it from blocking. And then the red queen invades, and how are you stopping all of this? You're not. There is, of course, the idea of guarding, but then you have this nasty pin. So how are you dealing with all these threats? You're not. And there is one other try here. Last one we'll look at. This one is kind of wild. And that is bishop takes pawn. Final try. Here you just take the rook, believe it or not. Move out with the queen. Important move. You want defense and you want the queen to be active. So you take with check, take back, move in, move in, move in. And here, bishop is guarding, knight is guarding. Yeah, there are definitely some threats. You have to guard against many ideas here. But try to buy yourself a move, actually, by attacking the queen. So queen falls back. You can take with an attack on the queen. You want checks. You're going to have to find them. So you take back. You don't want to get mated. So you check, pawn push. Okay, and now the bishop has to become active. So you block the bishop check, find another bishop check on this important diagonal. And the threats are very great here. You have to defend. King cannot move. So what do? You fall back, flush the king away, and as you can see, there are no spaces for the queen. So this one doesn't really work either. So as you can see, moving the pawn up to attack that knight, it doesn't work. Instead, you have to really respect the threat of the knight jump and move your own knight up to block the pin so you can take the knight with the pawn. So, continuing, the idea here is to just slaughter blue. Now, if green tries to move out too soon, for example, this one, that is not working out because you can move in for this diagonal and you just attack the queen. You can move out of the way, you move in, and you have multiple threats. You cannot deal with all of them. So the queen must move out 3 spaces instead of 2 spaces. Now, if the queen moves out 3 spaces, then things are a little bit different, but still winning for red-yellow. First, you move in. This is a very good move. Look at all the threats. Just taking advantage of all the power. Eventually, this is also an idea. You're trying to overwhelm blue-green. And this, yes, it creates some power, but it's a very shaky position also for the queen, don't forget. So, importantly, you have to move the queen over here because the idea is to check, and if you take back, the queen is not there, then you can pin that pawn, right? And I don't see what move you could do in between to wait. I don't see a good productive move in between. So I think queen out immediately is the move to make. And here, forcing the queen out, now you have this powerful move. Attacking the queen with the check. Check, okay, you have to take. Cannot pin, so you get the queen back. Kind of force green to waste a move. But with that wasted move, you have way too many threats. First, you want to block off the double check. So you have to first secure yourself. So what you do is you continue with the threats. Now the queen moves in, right? And so now you move in, take with check, just snip off the knight, take, and the idea is you cannot block this way because you have a mate threat. So what do we do here? We push the pawn. I think that's the best idea, just to get everything active. So you take, and then how are you stopping the mate? You're not. This is game over. There are some more lines here to look at, but each line is not satisfactory for blue and green. So again, moving the queen out. I don't see a better plan of action. So you push the pawn, pawn push, pawn push. Here you can just check with the idea of pushing the bishop out. So if you take back, take, win the rook, snip off the knight. Now green has no pieces in play. Finally you take, with the check, win the rook. But you don't need the rook, because you have a stronger idea. And what is that idea? It's checkmate. There's no stopping bishop over here. And this is soon to lead to mate. So let's look at one more idea. Moving the king over. It's not working either. You can just move the bishop out for the check threat. And here, you have the mate threat. This is just too devastating. There is no way to survive this attack. No way to survive at all. So what if green does the pawn push in a way that does not transfer to these variations? Is there another defense? So let's say instead of moving, well, instead of taking the queen out, you push the pawn this way. Will this idea work? Well, not really, because you're not developing anything. And there's this idea of counter play, but then you just take, and you take with the idea of a check, but it's okay because you take the pawn. So you take back, and then you can even just take with the queen. So, yeah. Too many threats. Winning position. And many ideas. Okay. There is one other queen out too early trap. Now, what is that trap? Respect the pin. Don't move the green queen out, but move the blue queen out. Here, that's no bueno. But moving the queen out all the way here, you can just attack and move in. And there's no real defense. Too many threats. Right, you're taking, but you're also winning pretty severely here. There's just too much to handle. So one final try. I call it the last strike. Can you just play defensively? is there a way to not take the queens out and just kind of make it solidify your position? I don't think there is. Because, again, the idea is to just pile up on blue, and if green is off balance, then take advantage of the balance differential. So let's say you just push the pawn. I think you just take the pawn. Move up for check. Well, it doesn't matter. We have the mate threat. You have to sacrifice the queen to prevent the mate threat. So then you move in, right? And now you can invade the corner pocket. Take back, move in, take, and how are you stopping the mate? You're not. One other idea in what I call the last strike, which is just the idea to be defensive. Let's see this one. So if you take with the knight, this one doesn't work either. You can't even do the knight because you just take and now you're defending the knight with the queen. So you win a rook that way. And if you move the pawn up as opposed to the knight up, will that work? Queen out early. Here you actually defend against that. There are some ideas. And here you still take. Check, defend, right? Very similar and very winning. So let's look at a few more ideas in this variation. We're getting slowly more and more defensive, seeing if there is any way out for blue-green. This one, with the bishop up, you just move the knight. Knight is a key player in pretty much every variation. So defending against the mate, now we go in for the other check on b10. How are you stopping this one? Now we have another mate threat. So you have to block it. But blocking it leads to queen takes. I guess you could always block with the knight. That is an idea. But I don't know. I think there's still not much that can be done here. Right? I think that even blocking with a knight, you can always move in. Then you have this check. We're just going to look at this variation because there's only so much you can look at in this chess game after all. Right? And this idea, you can always fall back. But then you have this killer move. Right? Take the queen. Well, I guess there's that check followed by a mate. There's also taking the queen. And you're going to have to sack the queen to set up a check to prevent the mate. Let's see the knight up. variation in the defensive lines. Okay, so this one, you have the pin, and you can't do anything about it. So I don't really see a way out. It's a pretty devastating line. And one other popular idea is called the double Sicilian. Now, this one I don't think really works either. It creates another positional weakness. It's unfortunate that this opening is just so powerful for red-yellow that there is no viable option as blue and green. The one other idea, pawn up 2, well, now this diagonal is guarded, so you have to try to attack in a different way. So if the queen comes out, that's not really working out. I could only really find queen up over here as an idea. I don't see much else for blue. You move in, and then you have that threat, block that threat, move in over here, create another threat. And if you think you can move in to trade the queens, then, well, this is a complicated line. But first, you attack another way. So king over, you can just take, and if you want to guard to allow the bishop to take, you can still take, and yes, you get the knight, but then you have the idea of queen check. And so you check, and you can prevent the mate, but it's okay because there are just too many checks. And in the end, you are up a ton of material. And this is just winning for red-yellow. So that was the best try I found for the double Sicilian. If you're passive, as we have seen in other variations, you just get run over. Blue gets destroyed by yellow's knight and red's queen. So another idea is to move the knight up and just create a very solid defense. And this is the one time when you cannot necessarily, well, you can't really just steamroll quite yet. You have a check threat. Finally, you just box the queen in, prevent green from playing, and then focus on blue. First, you have to prevent green from playing, and the nice pin here prevents the knight from taking that pawn. So here, as you can imagine, this will just be an all-out slaughter on blue that green will be helpless to do anything about. So there is one other idea, which is the double con. And the double con is moving the pawn up 1 space. Now the weakness of moving the pawn up 1 space is that you cannot easily develop the queen. You cannot block off the check without the bishop being able to take the bishop, and if the king takes back, the king becomes extremely vulnerable. So the queen has a very hard time developing. So if you do, for example, push the pawn, and the idea is that you could attack the queen, then you go in, and if you take back, and you develop threats this way. So you push, and you push, And now you can attack the queen, and there's no way to prevent the bishop from taking the bishop, attacking the queen, and having just an absolutely crushing position as red and yellow. Kind of funny how many dark square weaknesses this creates. So one thing to consider is how you're going to develop the queen without getting slaughtered. And one idea that comes to mind is, well, you can't move that pawn, you can't move that pawn. The whole idea of the queen moving over here is to take. So if you want to prevent that so you can move this pawn, then you have to prevent the queen from taking here, and then you can just take advantage of the pin, and you're up a knight. So one idea is pawn push up too. Here, I don't know. I guess you're just looking for ideas, anything you can find at this point. So you move the queen out. Don't even take the bishop. And if you go in this way, well, you can just move back to defend. So I really don't see how you deal with this power that red and yellow accumulate in this opening. The only real defense I think there is to the hyper-modern Sicilian is the icy stun Kuj Timi defense. Because in this opening, if the queen moves out early, here you can take. Why? Because now green can always sack the bishop this way. And so blue's going to take back, preventing the check. Right, so you could even just pawn push here. Queen is attacked, and you're going to take. So how are you going to deal with all these threats? Right, if you take, well, you can't really check. And if you move over there, you can check, get the queen that way, right? So as red, you really have to attack the queen here. And actually, you're down a bishop. So let's see here. You could even do that number. So immediately we see red loses a tempo, a very important tempo at that, one that allows red to make the triple play that we saw was so powerful. And because of this immediate tempo loss, and although the triple play doesn't work here, this single tempo loss, along with opening the tension available on yellow, really slows yellow down and red down, and it makes this game playable for blue-green. Which is why the icy stun Kuj Timi defense is, I think, the only response to the hypermodern Sicilian. And we will look at that another day on another video. So feel free to leave any comments if you think I missed anything. Let me know what you think of this opening. It's a really fun opening to play, as red yellow if you know what you're doing. Probably not so much as blue green. And I will catch you next time. Peace out.